let me take this moment to move to our final panel discussion, which will be on the topic of powering CX and engagement with real-time personalization. Personally, one of my favorite topics. For this, I would like to call on stage Apurva Srichar, Head of Marketing from Bandhan Bank, and Akash Srivastava, Head of Growth Marketing from LiveSpace. Apurva is the head of marketing at Bandhan Bank. He has over 18 years of experience in marketing with a demonstrated ability at managing and leading the marketing functions in diverse industries such as durables, FMCG, credit cards, life insurance, and banking. He has a track record of driving effective and award-winning marketing programs and has led many marketing deliverables, including marketing strategies, brand building through internal alignment of organization, market development, driving brands awareness and familiarity through sponsorship. He is quite passionate about design thinking and is recognized as an objective-driven professional, adaptive, result-oriented, dependable leader, and a profession with high standards of ethics. Welcome aboard. A little about Akash. He is the head of growth at LiveSpace and leads the company's performance marketing function. In his role, he is focused on building and marketing innovative consumer web and mobile products, catering to LiveSpace's target audience, that is homeowners. Akash specializes in rapidly improving consumer funnel metrics right from customer acquisition and engagement to conversion and retention. With over 10 years of entrepreneurial experience and over 5 years of web technology development experience, he is equipped with the unique ability to collaborate with tech, product, and business development teams to bring exponential growth. Along with Apurv and Akash, I would like to invite Subra as the moderator of this panel.
Thanks, Akash. Thanks, Apurva, for being here. I think we have the rather onerous task of standing between drinks and the evening. So we will try to keep it as engaging. I think we have seen in the first few sessions, I think you joined us a little late. So we saw telco, we've seen mortgage, we've seen life insurance. Now we are seeing home interiors and banking, right? So these are two now new industries. And if there's one thing we've learned across the sessions, it is that every industry's context is unique. When we think in terms of something like real-time personalization or capturing customer data and leveraging it, it's very, very different. So let's set some context for the audience to begin with. So let's talk in terms of your industry and what real-time personalization means in the context of your industry. So maybe Akash, you could go first and Apurva next.
For us, right, we are, as a startup, right, which is in rapid growing stage, right. So essentially personalization right now, and we are still in very early stage of basically personalization, right. But we have kept our targets for, next 6 months, right, where we have to reduce our customer acquisition costs, right. So there basically, step by step, what we want to achieve is that basically, how do we improve our conversions, right? So essentially, we are getting traffic across different channels, etc. So, and most of the conversion rate optimization activities have been taken care of, right? So essentially now next big thing for us is looking at how do we personalize, right? Improve our customer experience, improve customer engagement, right? To bring in better conversions, thereby reducing our costs. That's one. Second aspect of it is that customer right now engages with us across different channels. So there basically we are looking at how do we optimize our basically interaction with customers on his basically preferred channels. So essentially, we right now generate close to around 20% of our leads generate through WhatsApp. There is around basically 80% of around 60% of leads which come through website lead generation, and then there is another 20% which comes through basically phones, right? So there basically we want to give right now options to customer, personalize different communication channels, thereby reducing our CACs.
So I think what is also becoming clear, and I'll just come to you, Apurva, is that a lot of it is led with a very specific, and as we often see in online retail, is led with a very specific CAC objective, right? So CAC is like an overarching and very, very strong ROI metric that you always have in mind.
Absolutely, right? With the current market conditions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Apurva, coming to you then. So let's maybe set some context for you in terms of what real-time personalization means in the context of, let's say, Bandhan Bank and broadly banking in general.
Sure. Thanks, Shubhra. So note to self and note to everyone, when the organizers of a panel discussion ask you for a profile, please send it, otherwise your LinkedIn profile would be read out and it'll be very embarrassing. So all of you are carrying mobile phones, right? Just pick up your mobile phone. Do that right now, please. Go to your messages and see the last 10 messages that you would have received from non-individuals, from businesses. How many of them end up saying, "Dear customer"? Majority would say, "Dear customer," right? And these are businesses that you are actually dealing with. Right? They have all your information. Okay. Second, there could be also another example of a business saying, "Dear, your full name." That's what you know me as, right? I'm not Apurva, I'm Apurva Ranjan Sarkar for a bank that just sent me a message in the afternoon saying my KYC was due. So personalization, whether be it bank or any business, starts by really understanding the customer. And today, unfortunately, we've been hearing a lot of businesses speak since the beginning of the session about how we need to drive personalization. But I don't think there are too many businesses that are getting it right, even from a basic standpoint of how do you address the customer. Okay. From a banking point of view, I think the scope is immense, but we are not even scratching the surface. And majority of reasons for that is because of the legacy systems that we carry. And therefore, the data collection is from sources which do not understand each other's languages. Getting a one view of the customer becomes even more complex. And the most important thing, and we've seen that, and last 3 days has been really a fiesta for all the negative souls on social media, the immense pressure of conversions, right? So you put the customer behind and you bring forth what you want to do. And as soon as you put yourself ahead of the customer, no personalization can work, no business can work. It'll just be for the sake of numbers. It'll not really be customer-centric. The whole objective of personalization, which is to drive customer centricity and therefore the experience, goes for a toss. So coming back, with banking, it's the legacy systems that are a problem. The second problem is that there are sources of data that don't understand each other's languages. And the third is, as in the case of Airtel, in the space of about 10 minutes, you'll get 3 messages from the same bank about 3 different things that you can do, right? So the governance of communication, how much, to who, and how frequently, that I think is the third challenge that needs to be addressed for banks to get there. But the bottom line is that we are still not even scratching the surface, which is good news for Lemdesk, for you, also for Sabyasachi. There is a lot to do, and there is very little that we have done so far.
So this sets the tone nicely. So essentially, if we now are at ground zero, right, and we now need to get to a point where we start with, let's say, basic personalization, like you said, let's stop saying "dear customer" and say "dear Apurva" and "dear Akash." That's one basic. and then you can sort of build from there and then get to a point where you can optimize for CAC and things like that. So in this journey where you're sort of going through this myriad of possibilities, right? It would be great to understand two things. One is, what kind of a framework can you use to understand what data is important, what data is not, right? That is one aspect of it, right? Like obviously Apurva being the most basic data point, to the language, and I think Sandeep and the others were covering that, and all of that comes into the play, right? And the other aspect of it is, how do you actually go about collecting it in a consistent, clean manner, right? So what data and how do you collect it? So when you think from these two perspectives, what are some of the challenges you faced, and what are some best practices that you could probably share with the audience here? Apurva, maybe you can go first this time.
Sure. So, fortunately for a bank, there is immense data the customer himself or herself generates over time, right? And it's not just because of transactions, it's also because of the visits, etc. And therefore, the ways in which data can be collected have to be robust. So for instance, if there is a walk-in into the branch, do you have the right CRM solution to actually capture the data that, you know, there is a walk-in by this customer in the branch? Forget about just walk-in by the customer. If there is a third person who is coming in, and it is actually a bearer, we call them bearer. So if a bearer is walking in, is there a way of actually figuring out that the bearer comes for this customer? That means the customer himself or herself does not have the time to visit the branch. So what are the kinds of data that you can pick up from the various points of interaction? That is very important. Transaction data is getting captured, but even within transaction data, how granular can the data be, right? And somewhere in the backdrop resides, let's say, a data lake, where you can have all kinds of unstructured data on which you can then create models to figure out really what each individual customer is about, right? So that's one. Second, you know, with third-party cookies, you know, sort of seeing their way out soon, how is it that we can use first-party data anonymously as well? Because there's been a large discussion about privacy, which we'll come to possibly in the later half of this discussion. How do you therefore pick up anonymous data from the various data sources that are first-party data sources, be it through the various social media channels or for your website, etc. And the most important part that the CDP brings forth is, how do you then put the data together to create that persona of the customer, right? So collection of data can happen through a variety of sources for banks. The most important is transaction data, because that is the basis on which you can actually drive a lot of personalization. The other sources, if they can come together, and thankfully we have tools like Lemnis today, it just helps put all of them together and create that one view.
Akash.
Yeah. So for basically for us is, definitely data collection and data validation, right? It's a journey for us, right? Because there are so many systems, there are so many channels, right? So essentially collecting this data from these channels, and then whenever you are looking for a journey, designing a journey, right? So you will find out that you are not collecting a particular piece of data, or basically data which is coming is kind of wrong, right? So that's a time-taking process, laborious process, right? But that needs to be done essentially to basically get the fruits of personalization, right? So that is something which we are right now, and essentially we had a CDP system 2 years back, right? But essentially that's something we are trying to cover up, that we cover every single piece of data which is coming to our system. And that's well validated, and that's a correct data, right? Coming to, what was your second part of question?
So one is what data to collect, but the other is sort of like you spoke of validation challenges, etc., or the relevance of this. So what are some of the challenges that that you've seen in sort of collecting and all that?
So this is the part of challenge, right? And probably next part was your framework, right? So essentially, framework which we are looking at again is on the impact side, right? So basically what kind of impact certain journeys probably will create in the system. And there basically we do a lot of, I mean, besides data, right? I mean, inferring what data is saying, right? Is it correct? Is it passing the gut check, right? So what we call in our basically with our team, right? That many times there are certain conclusions which doesn't pass the gut check, right? So essentially there we then have multiple data points to just validate that our conclusions or hypothesis which we have brought in is correct or not, right? And that's where basically then we come back that, yeah, this particular implementation will create certain impact, right? And that's something which is very important. Being a startup, being a fast-growing startup, right? If impacts are not created, then that goes to basically that whole effort goes to dustbin, right? And then you start prioritizing the other efforts, right? There are n number of things which are to be done, right? So we have to make absolutely sure that if we are doing 3 experiments or 3 things, right, one creates the impact. And that's where basically we do this all data validations and impact analysis.
I think that the aspect of triangulation that you called out is definitely a very interesting one, that where you use multiple ways to sort of validate data and assess its potential impact, right?
Right.
So if you can, and maybe you may not want to share, or if you can, if you could pick one specific example, if we get down to the nitty-gritties, like one example where you felt that you homed into a variable or a personalization aspect of the customer which you found was relevant. Can you walk us through an example?
See, personalization aspect, I mean, for us, anyway, because we are there in like 40 plus cities in India, right? Singapore. So one of the biggest right now personalization aspect which is there, right, is creating basically trust and connection with customers across these cities, right? So there is geolocation sensitivities, right? Cultural sensitivities. So there basically we have seen our basically, and which we are trying to implement, right? So we have not yet implemented that, but we are bullish about it because what we have seen is on our paid side of campaigns, right? We have seen this vernacular advertisements playing a big role, right? Or localization of basically the communication, right, has played a big role, right? So that's where we feel, and we are bullish about that. If we are localizing the content on our pages, will basically deliver great results for us.
So Apurva, maybe so jumping to you now, if you can talk a little bit about, like for example, obviously, I think with Bandhan we can say we're sort of embarking on this journey, right? So obviously you would have thought a little further ahead. We are talking of a few things that you want to do now, but at the same time, there is a path that you're envisioning in terms of the journey you want to undertake. Talk us through what that will look like. I think one of the things that people often ask me when they talk about real-time personalization, CDP, etc., is how do you get started and how do you make sort of ongoing progress, right? So talk a little bit about that, because I think you would have spent some time thinking about that.
So I think, Shubhra, the right start point would be, one of the biggest challenges about getting into something like a CDP for various organizations is that there is no fixed route that can be taken, because it's only upon discovery that you can decide how do you want to go forward with it. And therefore, there are no benchmarks of the kind of expenses or a cost-benefit analysis that can actually be applied saying, itna to milega hi, right? Unfortunately, with the lack of that, the buy-in within the decision-making circle becomes a little difficult. And therefore, what you have to really go for are the low-hanging fruits, at least in our case. Go for the low-hanging fruits where the effort will be minimal, where the expense would be also minimal. But at the same time, there is some movement that can actually be displayed saying that this helped us achieve X. Now, with that in place, you can then start building on that experience by adding a few more lines which you believe can quickly give you results. So, in a time when, as we were talking about pizza, when pizza reaches you in less than 30 minutes, results from new tools, everyone expects to come very quickly, right? The patience is not there anymore. And mostly tools of new age tools are in traditional organizations looked at as a remedy for what offline is not able to deliver, right? And if you take time in delivering those results, it just establishes the fact that isse kuch hoga nahi, right? So therefore, you start with the low-hanging fruit, which is possibly the most cost-effective and also does not require too much effort in implementation. You show results from that, and then you keep adding lines. Talking about future, I think for a sector like banking, it is the entire lifetime of the customer that we can be with her and create value at various points in time through various things that we can provide.
Banking is very unique that way, actually.
Exactly. So, for those who have discerning parents and who open kids' accounts, it starts even before 18, right? And it goes on till the time possibly you are breathing your last, okay? So how is it that we can define the customer journey so granularly that we are able to add value to what the customer is looking for at various points in time? I think that is the end goal of any personalization, or any customer-oriented banking institute, right? And we are far away from there. We're really far away from there. Because if you actually look at the largest banks in the country, I don't think there has been a concerted effort to put together a customer journey map. And every line of business is doing its own work, right? So the customer is at the back end, the business numbers are in the front end, and I think that is where the challenge happens. So, if you look at it, say, by the time I retire, probably, still some time to go, if I was in the banking industry, I would want to make that impact by bringing in the concept of CLTV in letter and spirit. I think the spirit is still missing, which needs to be done through the various discussions that we've seen in the evening.
Got it. Akash, I think just feeding off of what Apurva was saying, that banking, of course, offers this sort of unique relationship-oriented a possibility with the customer, right? That starting from, like he said, from somebody could be a child all the way through retirement, old age, etc. Live space and on home furnishing wouldn't work like that, right? So you have probably distinct opportunities, moments, but they are not really continuous in nature, right? So when you take that perspective, but there are enough opportunities, right? As your ads themselves show, there are enough opportunities, right? So how do you assess that? How do you go about thinking about how you work with existing customers? Can you talk a little bit about that? Like people with whom you might already have some form of initial business established, but presumably that is not one time in nature. You want to keep expanding. So how do you think about that?
So essentially, see, any which ways right now, customer lifespan right now is 7 to 10 years, right? When on an average, where they come for basically home interiors requirement, right? So right now, essentially, we are not looking at that particularly, right? But what we are looking at is while customer has requirement of home interiors, right? So how do we capitalize on the opportunity, right? And customer is exploited with choices, right? It's becoming more and more demanding, right? So there basically we are trying to optimize our journey, right? Trying to understand customer more, personalizing our basically funnel, optimizing our funnel so as to get better conversions, right? So I mean that starts right from customer who has interacted with us on website right from the first time, right? So they are capturing our data, right? Right from which campaign he has come, which channel he has come, right? What he or she has interacted on the website, right? So that's basically first interaction, and there basically we have started doing a customer profiling, and that's where we are trying to optimize our funnel so as to impart best of customer experience and basically our goal of getting better conversions.
Got it. Apurva, this is a topic that you started touching upon, but we couldn't sort of delve deeper at that point. You spoke about data security and privacy, especially, right? So let's spend a moment in the context of that. So, how is Bandhan Bank looking at this? Right, being probably having more traditional outlook, roots, etc. It might be probably even more conservative than the average bank. Is it fair to say that? And in an environment like this, how do you, as somebody who wants to become more digital, more personalized, how do you sort of balance that?
So the one good thing in the evening has been that you've invited a lot of people from the BFSI sector, and no regulator in the BFSI sector is lenient. Okay, you could continue debating whether IRDAI is stricter than SEBI or RBI is stricter than both of them, but the fact that there are certain guidelines that have to be followed when you are in this business. See, there are two parts to this, Shubhra. One is what is allowed and the judgment of where to draw the line. A lot of times things could be allowed by the regulations, but as a business you have to take a call, where do I draw the line, right? As I said, I mean, banking as a business, we collect a lot of information. Even when you're opening an account, there's a lot of information that is collected on the form. Same with life insurance, same with any other financial product that you would be going for, home loan, etc. Even more stringent, right? In terms of the amount of data that you collect. So we already are collecting enough data, and that is mandated also to a large extent because that is the information you need to get the customer on board, and that is required, right? The other data that you collect, which is not necessary for the banking operation point of view. For example, I'm tracking the customer on my website. Is that necessary? It is not necessary, right? Tomorrow, if I don't collect the data, will RBI pull me up saying, why haven't you done that? No, they possibly don't even know what is first-party data. A lot of the people who would come and audit us, right? So, how much to collect is the first question. Does the user know you're going to collect data? And third is, how much of it will you use for the customer's benefit and not the business's benefit? I think these three are the most important things one has to consider. Take an example from the US. If you see, I think one of the leaders in personalization has been Zappos, right? So if you see how Zappos has done is that they have actually taken permission from the customers, and more than 70% of their customers have said, yes, I am willing to share my data with you if you're going to give me an experience, right? I think that is where we need to be. That's a highly matured space to be in. And we are far from it. More so that, it's the malpractice that has happened in this entire system. I bank with a lot of banks because, every place I've worked, there's a salary account with some other bank, right? So one of the large banks that I bank with, they call me every day at least twice with the same thing. Personal loan chahiye? Or koi loan chahiye? Right? Where is the personalization? I have never inquired about personal loans. They're just looking at my bank account. They're saying, paisa nahi hai iske paas, isko paisa dena hoga, right? And therefore, they are possibly doing that. Or when my credit card balance is too high, they would say, sir, EMI kara lijiye. Just because my balance is too high, I wouldn't want to do an EMI, right? So we are not using the data right as well. We are just, it's spray painting, it's carpet bombing. You're trying to do whatever to drive business. The focus is to get numbers. Until such time the focus is numbers, I'm repeating this, you will not get customer experience. But what is more useful is to know that when you drive customer experience, you get sustained numbers. It is not point in time. I think that is what we need to realize. And, privacy is a very, very sensitive issue. right? We've talked about Apple versus Android. You pick up a smartphone, you're not private. As simple as that, right? So today, if you ask, and Sam Altman is here, ChatGPT is here, and I think one of the topics would be generative AI. The data being collected is so much, and it is being processed so much that you don't know where your data resides and how it is being used, right? I was meeting up with Arundhati Bhattacharya just about a couple of weeks back, and she said that Jeff Bezos has once in a meeting where she was a part of it, had said that we don't know what AI will do because it is learning in a manner that we never envisaged. It has a life of its own, right? So privacy is important. Individuals, the information that needs to be used to make his or her life better should be used in that manner. Everything else needs to be just sieved.
Got it. I think you naturally move to the sort of last set of questions I wanted to ask you, which is if you look at the pace at which new technologies, new possibilities are emerging, and I think ChatGPT and generative AI being sort of one of them, right? And last year, if you look at it, it was, you had the metaverse, and I'm sure LiveSpace would have thought about it at some level. You had the blockchain coming through, and you spoke of trust and how do you establish trust. So when you have all of these kinds of technologies coming in, some of which impact the customer, some of which don't, what is a framework that you can use to assess impact, right? And the second is, how would you suggest to everybody here in the audience that they stay abreast of some of these possibilities in terms of assessing their impact? I'll go with you first.
Okay. So, essentially, I mean, see, on this framework would be same, right? That in your customer journey, right? Essentially, whatever the new technology is coming in, generative AI, right? So essentially, is it improving customer experience, engagement, right? And basically improving the customer funnel, right? So that's the basic principle which we would be looking at. And basically on technology side, right? So there are exciting things happening, right? But essentially, I would say wait, watch, right? Essentially, don't burn your fingers. Don't romanticize a lot on things, right? So that has been my principle,
Yes.
right? So essentially, maybe, I mean, if you burn fingers, again, I'm sounding little cliched, right? But then we don't have many chances, right? So be watchful, right? And yeah, look at different use cases which are happening across with different technologies, and probably start implementing and experimenting on that.
Got it. So essentially, wait and watch, don't burn your fingers sort of approach, and then see where it goes from there. Apurva?
Yeah, so I think we have to distinguish between what really has potential and what is the next shiny ball. Right? There'll be a
Very
lot of
much
shiny
so.
balls, and it'll come right at your faces. So you have to be really mature. While these are all new developments, one has to look at business and what is the sense a new development makes for the business is what is most important to assess before you even start working on it, right? A lot of companies got onto the metaverse, and with no disrespect to what they've tried to, I think in trying to do what they wanted, they've reached somewhere better than what they were earlier, right? They may not have succeeded in doing what they wanted to, but they got onto the metaverse before even knowing what it would entail, right? I don't think every company has the wherewithal, either from a resource point of view of human resources or money, to keep investing in every shiny new ball. So you have to really figure out what will add value, and therefore go after that. And for the ones that you're a little unsure about, I think you have to keep a distance from them and watch them mature.
Fantastic. I think with that, we come to the conclusion of the panel. Thank you very much, Apurva and Akash, for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
And by extension, we also, I think, Mansi, come to the end of the evening as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Thank
you, Akash and Apurva. If I could quickly just call Rinku onto the stage to present the appreciation of token to both of them. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as we draw near to the end of this remarkable summit event, I would like to express my sincerest gratitude and to all of our attendees for gracing their presence today, as well as extend my heartfelt thanks to all of our esteemed speakers and panelists who have entitled us with their profound knowledge and expertise. Now, it is my great pleasure to announce that the floor is open for dinner and drinks, a great time for all of us to network, unwind, and of course, relax from our busy day. I do look forward to seeing all of you next year and continue working with all of you for the coming time. With this, I am Mansi Mishra. It was a pleasure hosting you all. Have a great evening. Thank you.